Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 39 of belonging. Life doesn't feel so slow anymore, after all. Let's see, check the mushrooms, see if that's doing anything. And then in a second, I had an idea of something I wanted to talk about. I know it'd be best if I were able to, after finishing that first book of Zarathustra, to be able to talk a little bit about that and give some ideas on that, but I don't feel like that. I don't feel like doing that at all right now, and I wanted to do a little bit of research for that as well, hopefully. And I've been thinking about something else. But I don't want to get started talking about it until I check this, because otherwise I'm going to be completely distracted by whatever message it may or may not give me here. Hoping to record a couple episodes today and possibly get a special guest on later today. Ooh, 2 mushrooms. Let me pick a mushroom. Harvest. Give me the mushroom. I hate that mushroom sound. It's got like... Well, I don't hate it so much. Grow mushroom. Oh, I love gardening. The more mushrooms I grow, the faster the times go by. This... I'm slowly regrowing here. I assume next time I come by, there'll be 3 of them? Maybe? Let's see if hanging out in this spot down here does anything or not. Let me also get my timer on. The water is so loud. I don't think there's anything to click here. I'll just get my timer up. So, one thing I've noticed is even though I've said in another video that one of the things that gives me the most negativity out of YouTube is like opinion pieces and video diaries of like people doing much the same things I'm doing here, of talking about topics and such, but usually one of the things is that they generally, a lot of them are so sure of themselves, and I hope I try my best in my life to not be that sure of myself. I think that's just so annoying. But basically, I feel like I may or may not have found one of the biggest places of toxicity, and then I just keep doing it. So it's not, the irony of that, or whatever you want to call it, is not lost on me. I'm gonna sit down and stare. It's not lost on me. But anyway, out of all of that, one of the things that's been bothering me, and also I've seen this a lot on like Reddit recently, is when people call an argument a straw man argument. And I've also heard it in politics, and like actual mainstream politics, they'll call something a straw man. And the basic idea behind a straw man, as I understood it, was it's one of many logical fallacies, and the term logical fallacy I understand to mean one of many things that people do in an argument that's not conducive to a real argument, that's problematic for the sake of what an argument tries to do in showing truth and things like that. That's how I understand that. But for when it comes to a straw man argument, that's specifically how I understood that, was when you basically say, this is what someone else believes, and this is why they're wrong, when in reality, that they don't believe that. But to make sure I got this right, I wanted to look at some definitions that I get when Googling what is a straw man. So let's go over some of these definitions. Intentionally misrepresenting a proposition set up because it would be easier to defeat that proposition than an opponent's real argument. Okay, that makes sense. I want to point out specifically here in this definition that we do say an opponent's argument, right? Just keep that in mind. And then another definition, having the impression of refuting an argument, meanwhile the proper idea of argument under discussion was not addressed or properly refuted. In this one, I think the key word is under discussion. And then this last one that I wrote down, a weak or imaginary opposition, set up only to be easily confuted. I think that last definition is the worst and the one that I think most people kind of look at this as, because unlike those other two that specifically mention under discussion or an opponent, this one does not really come at the idea of a straw man from the idea of a discussion with an opponent. It comes at it from the idea of one person comes up with an, air quotes, imaginary opposition. And why I don't like the idea of, air quotes, imaginary opposition is because it implies that, like, you can come up with an idea that nobody believes and is imaginary. And yes, that's possible, but in practice, in the day and age we live in with billions of people and with so many differing thoughts, I'm under the impression that you can't really come up with an argument that nobody believes in. In reality, you can say just about anything, and there will be someone who will agree with that prospect that you've come up with. A lot of people don't see it that way. A lot of people, I think, are very close-minded, and they don't realize the breadth of the amount of different ideas that can be held by people. They have this close-minded idea of, this is one way to look at things, here's a different way of looking at things, and there's a right and wrong way. And that's pretty much bullshit as far as I can tell. There's an infinite way of looking at things, and no matter what you come up with as a proposed idea, it's somebody believes it. And in that sense, by that definition of a weak or imaginary opposition set up only to be easily confuted, I think that's a really useless definition of a straw man argument. I think to have a good definition of a straw man argument that means something and is actually a fallacy, you have to look at it from the perspective of an argument with another person, or an argument with a well-defined discussion already in place. But I think that to say a well-defined discussion already in place is already getting closer to that really weak definition of imaginary oppositions. It's just, I think the original intention, probably, I could be dead fucking wrong, but I think the original intention of the use of these logical fallacies is, when thinking of the logical fallacies, in a argument with one other person in a discussion format. And in a day and age where there's YouTube videos and there's like Reddit posts and forum posts and things like that, and someone will say something and then another person might say, that's a logical fallacy of a straw man, I don't think it holds up. I don't think you can use this, that's a straw man, so much for this format where a person is talking to what could be an infinite number, not an infinite number, but it could be thousands or millions potentially of people that one person is talking to. And to then say that argument's a straw man, I think is usually wrong. The types of situations where you could be right about something being a straw man argument would be, for instance, if I were to say, the left believes this, and this is why the left believes argument A, and I am going to refute argument A in this video or in this forum post or whatever. That is, I think, a straw man, but I think to call it a straw man is kind of ignoring more the point. But I'll get to that in a second. The reason it's a straw man is because it's saying someone believes something, right? It's saying a group of people believe something, which is always wrong. But some people will argue with that, and that's more what I'll get into. But it's saying a group of people believe something, which happens, people say that, and then it refutes that, and I think that's obvious why that's a straw man argument. And part of that is because groups of people don't all believe the same thing. And then some people will be like, oh, they're not really part of my group if they don't believe exactly what I believe. But that's such fucking bullshit. And it's so inconceivable to me that people really think that what they believe conforms to some sort of Platonic ideal. And what a Platonic ideal is this idea. Plato said that maybe there's a perfect form to both objects and ideas. So a Platonic ideal would be like for instance, the Platonic ideal of democracy or something would be some sort of perfect, unchanging idea of what democracy means, the complete, perfect base definition. I think for a number of reasons, that's completely bullshit. There aren't Platonic ideals and there aren't Platonic ideas of objects or anything of that sense. But people, without really realizing it, they believe that, and they'll say something like, oh, if you don't believe in this, you're not really a Democrat or you're not really a Republican. And then they'll come up with a new definition for whatever they've seen that doesn't completely conform to what they personally believe is this Platonic ideal of whatever their argument or their group is. It's so annoying. But so that's that base idea is that people talk and well, the people who are calling Strawman on a lot of these internet arguments, their baseline fault, I believe, is that they hear an argument that isn't theirs, and they make the mistake of thinking that their argument that they believe in is the only one, or it's like there's like a definite amount of arguments, and they hear the argument that someone has made and they think that's not a real argument that anyone is making. And that's completely bullshit because there are people making every argument. The only time a straw man, the use of the term straw man is useful is if you're debating one person and that one person you pretend to know what they believe and you tell them to their face, you believe this and this is why you're wrong, when you haven't understood what they actually believe. It doesn't work for any format where you're talking to hundreds, if not thousands or millions of people. And I think that's really annoying. Yeah. I'm sure I could have talked about this better. I'm sure I could have explained this 1,000 times better. But in this format of The Longing, we don't actually do things well. We do things in a shitty way. That's why so many thousands, if not thousands of people don't listen to The Longing. And they don't come here. And for good reason. Because I don't argue things well. Welcome to The Longing and goodbye from The Longing. I'll see you next time. Peace.